For more on Russia's agenda at the BRICS summit and its economy, I spoke to Anders Aslund, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute, and I asked him about Putin's biggest goal for his trip to Brazil.
It's essentially politics, and it's a little bit of energy, but it's not real economics. Putin is going around the world in order to shore up his friends, to show that he has some political support in the world.
Are you concerned that, I noticed the headlines, I mean, they're not very nice, and there's a lot of insinuations of the Cold War that have appeared, and now you've got this BRICS where you got Brazil and China, and you got this whole group of five, maybe even more down the road. Is it a situation where there's going to be them versus us on two groups of countries? Not
really. If you focus on President Putin, it appears to me that he's jumping around. Somebody said the other day that President Putin is not a chess player, he's a judo player. And in judo, you should surprise rather than being consistent.
We look at the economy in Russia, a lot of people are looking for either very slow growth or even potentially a recession as well. Either way, that's not good for President Putin, that's not good for Russia, and there's some that are saying that it ultimately may impact Europe as well. From your perspective, have things gone too far with this chess game? Is it starting to impact other countries to a point where people are going to start speaking up and say enough is enough of this?
Not really. You can put it from the other perspective and say Russia is one of the countries where it's easiest to predict what will happen to the economy. There will be no financial crisis, the public finances are in good order, the foreign balance is declining a little bit, but Russia still have a surplus in its current account, and growth will be between 0 and 1%. So Russia's problem is near economic stagnation, but it's not decline. So therefore Russia is, frankly, economically quite predictable.
The sanctions. This has been also predictable that there'd be more and more sanctions. Critics would argue that they simply don't work and they're ineffective completely. I'd like to get your thoughts whether or not you think they work, first of all.
Well, I think that the sanctions have shaved off 2–2.5% of the expected growth of Russia this year, simply by introducing uncertainty on the financial markets. The broad expectation, for example, from the Russian Central Bank today is that Russia will have a capital outflow of $100 billion this year, and that will reduce investment, which in turn will limit economic growth. But the sanctions themselves are not very heavy, so it's rather the threat of far more extensive sanctions, which would be primarily in the financial sector if Russia would clearly move into eastern Ukraine with regular troops.
There's no question, recently we've seen some fairly big deals, including on the energy sector, between Russia and China. They're both down there in Latin America. Both heads of states are as well. What do you think Russia wants China to be, aside from being a friend and a supporter on many issues? What ultimately is the goal from President Putin's perspective?
I think that President Putin wants to diversify his economy in the foreign sphere. Half of Russia's foreign trade is with Europe. Russia is far too dependent on Europe, and this is specifically in gas, because Russia exports gas almost entirely through pipelines, and then he can only export it to Europe. So now he wants to export gas to China also to get a more diversified export structure, but he's building a pipeline now, and that means that China will set the prices for the gas from Russia.